Some streets in Britain are not relics. People live on them. They receive post. They park their cars where merchants once tied up horses. The cobbles beneath their feet, the timber frames above their heads, none of it has been reconstructed. None of it is replica. It is simply still there. These are 12 places where the physical fabric of Britain has barely changed since the year 1600. Let us begin with a street most of you will recognise, even if you have never been there. The Shambles in York is often called the best preserved medieval street in Europe. It appears in almost every guidebook to England. The timber-framed buildings date from the 14th and 15th centuries, and they lean inwards so dramatically that in some sections you could reach out and touch both sides of the street with your arms outstretched. The upper stories hang over the lane below, closing out the sky. The street was recorded in the Domesday Book over 900 years ago. Its name comes from the Old English word for the shelves or benches where butchers displayed their meat. As recently as 1872, there were 25 butchers trading here. Today there are none. The shops sell fudge and candles and souvenirs now. But the street itself has not moved. The cobbles are worn smooth. The timber is dark with age. A shrine to Margaret Clitheroe sits halfway along the lane. She was martyred in 1586. Her husband was a butcher on this very street. Thousands of visitors walk the Shambles every day. Most of them are looking up at the buildings. Very few of them look down at the cobbles beneath their feet, which have been walked on for 7 centuries. Now south, a long way south, to the small cathedral city of Wells in Somerset, and to a street that is, by any measure, extraordinary. Vicars Close in Wells is believed to be the oldest purely residential street in Europe, with its original buildings still intact. It was built beginning in 1348 for the Vicars Choral of Wells Cathedral, and construction continued until 1430. 27 houses line a cobbled lane, roughly 140 metres long. The street is deliberately tapered. It narrows by about 3 metres from one end to the other, creating an optical illusion that makes the close appear longer than it really is. Medieval architects playing tricks with perspective 700 years ago. The chimneys were added in the 15th century. The chapel and library sit at the north end. And here is the remarkable thing. People still live here. The houses still serve their original purpose, housing those connected to the cathedral. A major restoration project is currently underway, expected to cost around £7 million. Over £6 million has already been secured. You can walk this street on a quiet afternoon and hear nothing but your own footsteps on the stone. It is not frozen in time. It is simply continuing. Crossing into East Sussex, we reach the ancient hilltop town of Rye, and halfway down the steepest part of it, Mermaid Street. The cobbles here are brutal, large, rounded, irregular. They were not designed for comfort, they were designed for drainage. Timber-framed houses lean at angles that seem to defy gravity. The Mermaid Inn has stood on this street since at least 1156, when Rye was granted membership of the Cinque ports. French raiders burned the original inn to the ground in 1377. Only the cellars survived. It was rebuilt around 1420 and became a notorious stronghold in the 1740s for the Hawkhurst gang, a ruthless band of smugglers who operated from the cellars to the Old Bell Inn nearby. The houses on Mermaid Street have names instead of numbers. The house with 2 front doors. The house opposite. Henry James lived in Rye. So did E.F. Benson, who used the town as the setting for his Map and Lucia novels. In the 1891 census, Mermaid Street was recorded as a rundown area. Today, not a single child lives on the street permanently. It has gone from working lane to preserved treasure in just over a century. The buildings did not change. The people did. Now north again, sharply north, to Lincoln, where the Romans built their first road up the hill around 48 AD. Steep Hill connects the lower town to the Cathedral Quarter, and it earns its name honestly. The gradient reaches a maximum steepness of 1 in 6, or roughly 16%. In 2012, it was voted Britain's Great Street by the Academy of Urbanism. But it was great long before anyone gave it an award. Jew's House, partway up the hill, dates from the mid-12th century. It is one of the oldest domestic buildings in Britain still standing and still in use. It has been associated with the medieval Jewish community that thrived in Lincoln before the expulsion of 1290. Nearby sits Jew's Court, believed to be the site of a medieval synagogue. The Norman house further up the hill is even older. A carved stone seat partway up the climb is known as the Mayor's Chair, a resting point for weary travellers that has been there since the 17th century. Walking Steep Hill is walking through Roman, Norman, medieval and Tudor England in a single climb. Your knees will know about it. But you will understand why people have been making this journey for nearly 2,000 years. East now to Norwich, and to a street that almost did not survive at all. Elm Hill is a gently curving cobbled lane lined with timber-framed buildings from the 15th and 16th centuries. It takes its name from an elm tree that stood in the small square since the 1500s. In 1507, a devastating fire tore through this part of Norwich and destroyed most of the area. What stands today was rebuilt in the decades that followed. But here is the part that should make you pause. In the 1920s, the City Council voted on whether to demolish Elm Hill entirely and replace it with modern development. The vote to save it passed by a single vote. One vote. Everything you see when you walk Elm Hill today, the leaning timber, the antique shops, the independent bookshops tucked into medieval doorways, all of it exists because of one person raising their hand. Southwest to Dorset, and to the steepest and most photographed street in England. Gold Hill in Shaftesbury needs no introduction to anyone who watched television in the 1970s. The young Ridley Scott directed the Hovis bread advert here in 1973. A boy pushing a bicycle up the cobbled hill. Brass band on the soundtrack. It became one of the most beloved commercials in British television history. But Gold Hill was famous long before that. The ancient retaining wall running down one side belongs to the former Shaftesbury Abbey, founded by King Alfred the Great in 888 AD. Thatched and stone cottages cascade down the other side. The view from the top stretches across the Blackmoor Vale. Locals will tell you the hill is considerably steeper than it looks on screen. They are not exaggerating. But the cobbles are the same cobbles. The wall is the same wall. The view has not changed in 1,000 years. Down to Kent now, to a town that was once one of the most important ports in England, and is now 2 miles from the sea. Strand Street in Sandwich is thought to have the longest unbroken stretch of timber-framed buildings in England. The town itself is often described as the most complete medieval town in the country. Its street plan has barely changed since the Domesday Book of 1086. Sandwich was one of the original Cinque ports, vital to England's naval defence. But the harbour silted up. The Wantsum Channel that once separated the Isle of Thanet from the mainland disappeared entirely. The sea retreated, and prosperity went with it. And that, paradoxically, is why the street survived. Nobody had the money to knock anything down and build something new. The Church of St. Peter still rings a curfew bell every evening. The Mayor of Sandwich still wears a black robe. It is a mark of mourning for the mayor who was killed in the French raid of 1457, 569 years of grief, observed without interruption. West to Chester, where the streets do something found nowhere else in the world. The rows are a system of covered walkways running at first-floor level along the main streets of the medieval city. They date from at least the late 13th century. Stone undercrofts beneath them, some vaulted, survive from the 1300s. You walk along a continuous covered gallery, looking down through medieval arches at the street below. Shops open on both levels. Daniel Defoe visited Chester and complained that the rows made the city look old and ugly. John Wesley praised them for keeping him clean and dry in bad weather. Watergate Street preserves the rows in their most complete form. Lecce House on Watergate Street Row is the best preserved medieval timber-framed building in the entire system. Chester's rows are unique. No other city in England or anywhere else built shopping streets on two levels like this. The fact that they survive, still in commercial use, still sheltering shoppers from the rain just as they did 7 centuries ago, is something worth walking slowly through. Into the quiet of Herefordshire now. To Ledbury, a market town granted its charter by King Stephen in 1138. Church Lane climbs from the High Street to the Church of St Michael and All Angels. It is narrow, cobbled, and lined with timber-framed buildings that lean at angles modern building regulations would never permit. The 16th century market house stands raised on oak posts at the foot of the lane, open at ground level. You can walk beneath it without realizing you have just passed through a building that has held its ground for over 400 years. Ledbury has one of the largest collections of timber-framed houses anywhere in England. The town is quiet. It does not shout about its history. It simply wears it. East to Suffolk, to a village that was once one of the wealthiest places in Tudor England. Lavenham in the 15th and 16th centuries was among the 20 richest towns in the country. The wool trade built it. When that trade collapsed, the money vanished, and nobody could afford to demolish anything and start again. The result is over 300 listed buildings in a village of fewer than 2,000 people. The high street buckles and leans in ways that would alarm a modern surveyor, but have held firm for 500 years. The Guildhall was built around 1529 by the Guild of Corpus Christi and now belongs to the National Trust. De Vere House on Water Street served as a filming location for the Harry Potter films, though many locals profess not to care about that very much. What matters to them is that the village looks today almost exactly as it looked when Henry VIII was on the throne. That is not sentiment, that is structural fact. To Shrewsbury, where the River Severn loops around the medieval town centre like a natural moat, Butcher Row, Fish Street and Grope Lane retain their medieval names and their medieval narrowness. The street plan has barely changed because the river left nowhere else to build. Bare Steps, a cluster of 14th century timber-framed buildings between Fish Street and St Alkmund's Square, has been restored and serves as a community hall. Charles Darwin was born in Shrewsbury in 1809. He walked these streets on his way to school. The timber frames were already old when he passed them. They are older still now. They have not moved. And finally, to London. Not the London of glass towers and construction cranes. The other London. The one most people walk past without seeing. Cloth Fair runs alongside the Romanesque church of St Bartholomew the Great, founded in 1123. The Great Fire of 1666 destroyed almost everything in the City of London. But it did not reach Cloth Fair. The street sits just outside the fire's boundary. Number 41 and number 42 are often cited as the oldest domestic buildings in the city, with overhanging first floors and facades from the 17th century. The street takes its name from the Bartholomew Fair, a cloth fair held annually from 1133 until 1855. 7 centuries of trading on the same patch of ground. Walk Cloth Fair today, and you pass through a gateway that has stood for 800 years, into a lane so narrow that the buses on Aldersgate Street feel like they belong to a different century. They do. The street does not. It belongs to the 1600s, and it has not left. 12 streets. Timber darkened by centuries of rain. Cobblestones polished by generations of feet. These places were not saved by grand campaigns. Most of them survived by accident, by poverty, by a single vote, by a harbour silting up and taking the money with it. Nobody got around to replacing them, and now they cannot be replaced. The stones remember, even when we forget to look down.